Stop the world!
Welcome to another video edition of ASPI's podcast, Stop the World. I'm Justin Bassey.
And I'm David Rowe.
Today, we're bringing you the third edition of the video podcast that we recorded in the margins of the Sydney Dialogue, which was held in early September.
That's right. We've got Bethany Allen, who's ASPI's own Head of China Investigations and Analysis. Bethany speaking with Her Excellency Dato Astanah Abdul Aziz, Deputy Secretary-General of ASEAN for Political Security Community.
Yeah, they discussed Dato Astanah's role as a diplomat within the Malaysian Foreign Ministry and how that led to her role currently in ASEAN.
That's right. They explore the role of ASEAN, the value it brings to the region. It's not just economic value, but also the role in building relationships within the region.
That's right, and in particular, of course, there are growing tensions within the South China Sea. We are seeing increasing and daily harassment and intimidation by China of the Philippines. And so there's a discussion on the role that ASEAN can and should play in trying to, as you say, build those relationships and seeing whether stability can be regained.
And of course, they'll talk about disruptive technologies as well, Bethany and Dato Astanah. Disruptive technologies being the core of the Sydney Dialogue, the main subject. They'll talk about the role of ASEAN in managing and helping manage the rise of those technologies, particularly artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating discussion. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. For anyone who was watching the panel that Dato Astanah was on, they would have seen there was much diversity, there was a little bit of disagreement, and I'm sure a lot of people will get much out of this conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today at the Sydney Dialogue. I am Bethany Allen, the Head of China Investigations and Analysis at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. I am delighted to be joined today on the podcast by Her Excellency Dato Astanah Abdul Aziz, Deputy Secretary-General for Political Security Community at the ASEAN Secretariat.
Thank you for inviting me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful day yesterday and today of conversations. And I hope to continue those conversations in a little more in-depth format right here with this podcast. And we'd love to start out by hearing a little bit about your own career path. You're a seasoned diplomat, spending many years within Malaysia's foreign ministry. How has that background led you to where you are today with ASEAN?
Season makes me sound so old. Well,
skilled
much
diplomat.
Better, I prefer. I joined the Malaysian civil service because in Malaysia the civil service is one, and you can move between the different ministries. Almost about 30 years ago, and in my case, I've only ever been at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I have been, I think, very fortunate in some of the desks I've been assigned to and also the postings I've been on. I'm actually kind of proud of the CV I've built up because of the different desks I've done. And I feel that I've done lots of different things. So in 2014, on the eve of Malaysia's last chairmanship of ASEAN, that was when I was transferred to our ASEAN-Malaysia National Secretariat. Every ASEAN country needs to have a national secretariat for ASEAN, and it needs to be within the foreign ministry of that country. So I was there and I was involved in preparing for Malaysia's chairmanship. I was involved during Malaysia's chairmanship as well for 2015, and I had found that to be an incredibly exciting, challenging, very informative. I learned so much during that time, and what was also key for me on a personal level was that when that happened, I became a true believer in ASEAN. Up until then, my approach in the ministry had been when the bosses asked, where would you like, what desk would you like to be assigned to? And my response had always been anywhere except ASEAN. Because I had felt about ASEAN then, having never done it, was that ASEAN was a talk shop. And then I was forced to the desk, and then I started doing it. And today I am a firm believer of ASEAN in the work that ASEAN does. But that also allows me to comprehend when I meet people today who tell me ASEAN is a talk shop. I understand where they are coming from, because that was also what I myself had thought previously. And I think it gives me a better position to explain to them why ASEAN may be seen as a talk shop, and maybe to some extent it is, but what value that it gets out of it. So I think what definitely helps me a lot in my position here today as the Deputy Secretary General is the stint of about 4 years that I had done at the ASEAN Malaysia National Secretariat doing the file as well.
Okay, and tell me, what is some of that value that now that you're working with ASEAN, what is some of that value that you see that ASEAN brings?
What it is that individually, the 10 of us, we are, except for 2 or 3 countries within that, we are all small countries. And if we had decided to go our own way without coming together to forge a regional organization, I think, yes, we would have made some amount of progress, but perhaps not as much progress as we all cumulatively have. And this we can see not necessarily in the first 20 to 30 years, because, it was a formative time nationally for many of the countries who were part of ASEAN then, the initial 5. But I think a good way to look at it is in the 90s, when we had 4 additional countries joining ASEAN, what we refer to as the CLMV, which was Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. And the reason these are easy countries to look at the value of becoming part of ASEAN is you could see how the economic trajectory of these countries really spiked through the roof after they became a member of ASEAN, compared to previous to that. And so, and these countries itself absolutely recognize the value it had in country after their membership in ASEAN. So we definitely see a lot of value in not just on the economic track, but that the countries, the people within ASEAN began to also feel much closer to each other. And I think this we could see was when AirAsia started out. It's a low-cost airline. It started out of Malaysia, but then Thailand also had Thailand AirAsia, Indonesia had Indonesia AirAsia, etc. And the people within, it's a regional airline, and the people within ASEAN just started traveling so freely within the 10 countries of ASEAN mostly, and there was a much closer feeling of us being people of one region, and that we were all really brothers to each other.
ASEAN is a regional organization with 10 members, and does the need or the desire for ASEAN consensus mean that at times you have to compromise on some national level issues?
I suppose maybe yes, but often it is not a full compromise in a sense that you don't feel that you give up everything. Because ASEAN also tries to work in a way where everyone's interests are represented, and then it becomes a degree to how much of that interest is actually represented. So you may not always get 100%, but it is impossible to always get 100% when you value working with friends, working with people, working in an organization. I think that reality is always there. But also, even as ASEAN works in consensus, in the economic track, ASEAN has over the years developed an ASEAN -X consensus, which means that there are times, but this has so far only remained in the economic track, because it is doable in the economic track, where ASEAN can move without all 10. But even within the ASEAN -X consensus, there is still the element of consensus where first all the 10 agree for certain members of ASEAN to move ahead without some. So even the ones who say, I am not ready, but you go ahead. I will join when I am ready. So the element of consensus is very, very present. Yes, consensus slows you down, but consensus takes you much further. So I think there is the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far,
go together.
Go together.
Yes.
So ASEAN has also fully believed in this, and we have always chosen to go together. We see a lot more value in that.
So it sounds like there's a degree of flexibility, even within that need for consensus.
Yes.
And that leads me, I think, quite smoothly to a question I want to ask. It applies to the Philippines, but maybe to a lesser extent, Vietnam, a few other countries that have these maritime disputes with China. And in the case of the Philippines, it's been quite severe. In fact, some people say that there was nearly an outbreak of actual military violence between the Philippines and China. How does ASEAN manage a situation like that? And I know that you yesterday in the session put this issue of these great powers in the context of ASEAN tries to be friends to all.
ASEAN is friends.
Is friends to all. ASEAN is friends to all. So how would you balance a situation in which a member, the Philippines, has an extremely difficult relationship with China, but ASEAN does not?
That is a very good question you ask, and it's not an easy question to deal with. Now, the thing is, Philippines is in the eye of the storm at the moment, and it is in people's eyes at the moment. So people kind of forget that Philippines is not the only country that has contestation with China on the South China Sea. 4 countries do. So that may be a question to ask is, why is the brunt on the Philippines at the moment? And you're right to say also to some extent, but maybe at the moment at lesser degree Vietnam. Well, Malaysia also have contested areas with, well, we don't contest it. For us, it's a given. It's a Malaysian, sovereignty over the area. Brunei also have this issue. So within ASEAN, there are 4 countries that are involved in disputes in the South China Sea. Now, the thing is, each of us have the freedom, because we are all sovereign, each of us have our own way of dealing with the issue, and we are free to do it. ASEAN does not stop any of its members in dealing with the issues as it sees fit, because within ASEAN, no one has given up any amount of sovereignty. And these are all very issues that really impinge squarely on the sovereignty issue. So perhaps other questions can come along with that. If the Philippines were to turn to ASEAN and ask us for support, I think ASEAN is ready, but support must be given where the interests of other members of ASEAN are not compromised. It cannot be, no member will agree for their interest to be compromised for the sake of one, particularly when the one acts on a national basis. Therefore, any of us take actions in this instance in a national capacity. We do not confer with the others. And when we do not confer with the others, we cannot expect that the others are going to stand squarely with you, because you have chosen the trajectory that you want to take, whatever may come with it. Now, even as you say with the Philippines right now, yes, it would appear that they almost went into military skirmish. I think it bears thinking, remembering that with Vietnam at some point in the past, there were lives lost. And Vietnam and China has managed to move past that. So the most serious, because there were loss of lives, I would say in each of the 4, was the contestation with Vietnam way back when. And I think, if anything, it teaches the rest of us to sort of know how far to go and where to sort of draw the line. But at the same time, we all remind each other, and we all tell our friends out there that while this is a difficult issue that we need to deal with, there are many other areas in our relationship with China that actually is of immense benefit to us, and I believe also of immense benefit to China. I think for the last 15 years, China has been each individual ASEAN member country's largest trading partner. And for the last 3 to 4 years, I believe, ASEAN has been China's largest trading partner. And this, I think, is a great a very shorthand way of showing how important that relationship is, not only of China to ASEAN, but also ASEAN to China. So I think each of us derive a lot of value out of this. And we hope that that also reminds each other, including China, how we need to move forward on this issue. So back to your question, if the Philippines does want support from the rest of ASEAN, we are here. We are ready to lend support to each other, but it cannot be at cost to our own national interests as well.
That's a very fulsome response, and I feel like I understand this relationship much better now.
Okay.
Do you think that China understands that ASEAN has this kind of balance here of supporting its members and also, wanting to maintain good trade relations with China? Do you feel that China has ever made unreasonable demands of ASEAN?
That's a correct way to answer that, and a difficult way to answer that. I do believe that China has a very good understanding of how ASEAN works, of its relationships with ASEAN, with ASEAN members individually, and as ASEAN with ASEAN as a grouping. China, and I think one way to manifest this is ASEAN became a full dialogue partner of ASEAN relatively late, within the 10 and within the 11. It was only in 1988 or thereabouts. For comparison, Australia was ASEAN's first dialogue partner, and that was as early as 1974. So, and then the others very quickly became a dialogue partner. China was a little bit later. But in very short years following becoming a full dialogue partner, it became the most active partner of ASEAN. So meaning that once it decided to become part of that family, it put everything into that relationship. And I think this must be recognized, this must be valued. So it really put its money where its mouth is. So the amount of cooperation activities, the kind of trading relationship, China was the first country that proposed an FTA with ASEAN rather than any of our other dialogue partners. So, it very quickly put value in that relationship. And because we all benefited from it, it's very difficult to value that relationship in any way other than to see that China does recognize the value of ASEAN. And another time where we really saw China putting a lot of value on that relationship was during the Asian financial crisis, where certainly Malaysia was very badly affected, Indonesia was very badly affected, I think Thailand was badly affected as well. Not only did China come forward to make loans available, a very big thing China did was not to devalue its currency. And that one action ensured that countries and ASEAN, the affected countries and ASEAN, did not fall into bankruptcy. And this is something you must value of your friends, because China forego the possibility of making a lot of money by just that one action of devaluing its currency. But it knew it would have just sent us into bankruptcy, and from which it would have been very difficult for us to recover from. And it valued its relationship, it valued the long-term economic relationship rather than the short-term of being able to, make financial value out of it. So when you remember these things, you see how China values the relationship as well.
I want to ask you about the role or the concerns around disruptive technology. So, how do you feel that ASEAN is working? That ASEAN nations are working together to address the rise of disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence?
So this is now one good thing about I think the members of ASEAN and then working as a grouping, ASEAN as a grouping, is that we're always looking at what's the next big thing coming up. So ASEAN had started working on the Fourth Industrial Revolution more than a decade ago. It had already said, okay, this is the next big thing coming and we need to prepare for it. And similarly with disruptive technologies, it's something that ASEAN had started looking at more than, quite some years ago. And we are saying, okay, this is something that we need to build up our expertise on. But we are also fully mindful that we are going to be fully challenged by it. And from very early on, we were talking to our dialogue partners, our friends, those who are more capable, in telling them, in asking them to please build up our capacity. Please work with us, share with us your technology, your capacities in building up ours. First, so that we are not so vulnerable, and second, so that we can leverage on it and so that we can all benefit from it. Within ASEAN itself, of course, we work very closely. The most forward on this is Singapore. So Singapore has actually set up a Center of Excellence on this. It's called ACICE, and I've just met with, sorry if you allow me a couple of seconds. So it is the Cybersecurity and Information Center of Excellence. It is Singapore that has set it up from its funds, but it is an ASEAN Center of Excellence. So what this center does, among the things it does, is it runs capacity building programs, etc., both from its own expertise, and I believe that they are also open to getting expertise from our partners to run programs as well. One reality, and ASEAN is very open about it, is we've just come from our ASEAN ministerial meeting on transnational crime, and we had this conversation with individual ministers from the ASEAN countries, and we asked them, what do you find to be among your biggest challenges on transnational crime? The first remains, unfortunately, on drug trafficking. And the second one, almost among all of them, they're saying is cybercrime on AI as well. While ASEAN recognizes that it brings a lot of value to us and we're benefiting from it, from the economic sphere, it also poses a big challenge to us. So we are talking to each other, we are working with each other, what we can do, and where we are fully aware that we are challenged and our capacities are limited, we go to our friends, we go to our partners, and we ask them to work with us as well. So that's some of the ways that we are trying to handle this head on.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today and for having this conversation with me. And thank you also for joining us at this year's Sydney Dialogue. And thank you also to our viewers.
Thank you. Thank you first to ASPI for inviting me. Second, to the Government of Australia for bringing me over for a larger program as well. And thanks to you, Bethany, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit on ASEAN. Thank you.
Great.